Hi everyone, it's your pal Lee, Hoover Public Library, and we're getting ready to finish. Okay, so I've done 5 times around creating the ribbing at the top. I'm going to do one more time around, and then I'll show you how to finish it up. And look at you, you're knitting in the round. Okay, here we go. So last time around, follow that pattern. Knit 2 and purl 2. Knit 2, purl 2. Knit 2, you guessed it, purl 2. Here we go. Start needle 2. Oops, didn't get my yarn right. There we go. Now that's correct. Purling 2. Knitting 2. Purling 2. Knitting 2. Here we go, purling 2. Knitting 2. Last 10. Put your arm in the right spot and purl 2. Knit 2. Purl 2. And now last 4 stitches, so I'm going to knit 2 and purl 2. Okay, now it's time to bind off. Take a look at the ribbing you've made. Maybe you're not sure, maybe you think, better check. Lamekins. Alright, I've got 1 inch of ribbing, and I know from measuring my finished one, 1 inch of ribbing. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to bind off. So I'm going to bind off staying in the same pattern of stitches as this bit of ribbing that I've made. So I'm going to knit. Got 1 stitch knitted onto my right needle, and then I'm going to knit a 2nd stitch, and then I'm going to take the needle in my left hand, grab that 1st stitch I did, pass it over the top of the 2nd stitch, and drop it off. And there we go, got the 1 stitch. Now the next 2 stitches are in purl, so I'm going to switch the yarn around, purl a stitch, and grab that knitted stitch, pass it over the top of the stitch I just purled, drop it off, and I'm going to purl a stitch and pass over that first purled stitch on top of the 2nd purled stitch, drop it off. Switch my yarn to the back, because now I'm knitting a stitch. Got it knitted, take that purled stitch, move it over the top, drop it off. Alright, my next stitch is knitted, so bind off. Alright, switch the yarn around, purl a stitch, because I'm back to the purl, grab that stitch, push it over the top, got to purl 1 more stitch, grab the 1st stitch, bring it over the top, put my yarn to the back, here we go, knit a stitch, and bring it over the top, and now I'm going to knit a stitch. over the top. Okay, I'm going to take this stitch, this needle that's clean, full, I'm going to drop this needle, take this needle and just set her aside, because now I'm going to clear off the stitches on needle 2. So yarn to the front to purl, purl a stitch, and bind off. Purl a stitch and bind off. Back to knit. So the yarn goes back, knit a stitch, bind off, knit a stitch, bind off. Bring that yarn back around front to purl a stitch and bind it off, purl a stitch and bind it off. Back around to the back because I'm going to knit and bind off and knit, bind off. Yarn back to the front to purl and bind off, purl and bind off. Got that yarn to the back because I got to knit and bind off and knit and bind that off. There we go, set that guy down. Last needle. So I'm back to purl. So I'm going to purl and drop it off. Oop, too soon. Keep it forward. Purl and drop it off. Now I can switch back. I'm going to knit, pull it over, drop it off, and knit, pull that stitch over, and drop it off. Back around to purl, pull that stitch over, and purl, and pull that stitch over. Last 4. Here we go. Let's knit, bind off, knit, bind off. Last 2 are in purl, so I'm going to purl, bind off, purl, and bind off. So I've got 1 stitch left on my needle. I've got my yarn. So got my scissors, and I'm just going to cut myself a little tail about, again, 3 inches. There we go. So I've got my tail, and I've got that last stitch on that last needle. So I'm just going to make it large enough that I can poke the tail through like a good old slip knot. And I'm just going to tighten it up. And look at that. It's all over except for the weaving in, which is a quick and easy job. So, and you may look at your ribbing and you may be like, you know, it's tight in some places and loose in others. That's okay. Every time you take it, kind of give it a pull, you redistribute that tension, and so your stitches get better. All right, so now the last little thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little tapestry needle like this. I'm going to take these little tails that I've got where I started and where I ended. I'm going to catch it And just for a few stitches, I'm going to weave it in, right? And that just finishes it off. So I see which way I look inside. I like to look inside the garment and just see which way the stitches are lying. Take the needle and just sort of catch a stitch, pull it through, maybe move a couple of stitches, pull it through another place. You just want it to be caught by, say, 4 stitches, 3 stitches, wherever you feel comfortable, right? So I've gotten it, this tail is now woven in across 3 stitches, so it's going to stay there. It's locked in. So then I'm just going to take my scissors and snip that little bit of excess off. Right. Give it a little pull and it tightens up. So that's all nice and finished and looks neat. Same thing at the top. Put that little tapestry needle, you can get it in any craft store. Find it in the knitting notions, and the sewing notions. And just kind of see which way. We give it a nice little bit of tension. Oh, I think I'll go to the left here. And that way that'll pull that little tail back. Alright, see I've caught it right there. And I just pull it through. So the little bit of tail and knot is pulled through to where it kind of covers itself up. And just do that just a few more times, kind of along the same area. Catch 2 or 3 stitches. Doesn't have to be precise. Alright, there you go. So you can see I've caught it in a few places. So it's good and tight in there. It's not going to go anywhere. And I'll just snip it off. There we go. Alright. And as you look it over, you may see some things like, oh yeah, I've got a little extra bit of yarn right here in that thumb hole. It's okay. Nobody's going to see it. When you put your hand in there, see? Nobody sees that little bit of extra yarn. And like I said, over time as you wear it and you move your hand around, that yarn is going to get pulled into the other stitches and you won't have that excess anymore. And there you are. A couple of very nice little hand warmers. They're a perfect little weekend project. If you need a quick gift for someone, it's a great thing. They're handmade, they're kind of sweet. You can use up some stash, and you know, I've seen people do different variations on them. I have a pair that a friend made for me that she needle pointed bookworm across the knuckles, you know, like knuckle tattoos. So you can do all kinds of things with them, but they give you just a nice little hand warmer to enjoy and keep your little hands warm. Hope you enjoyed this project, and we'd love to get your feedback on this. And there'll be information in your packet about how you can email us, and we'd love to hear from you. And we'd love to see pictures of your finished products. So if you could email us at oh gosh, I've forgotten the email. HooverCirc.net. I'm sorry. HooverCirc. Well, we'll get that email for you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great time. Bye-bye.